All right, got everything going. Hey everyone, EOC Goslin, NBA salary cap analyst, and we had a pretty rare type of trade today, pick swaps. Starting to get a little more common. We last saw it, a pretty big one with Houston and Brooklyn at the draft, and now we got Phoenix and Utah doing one. So the Suns, as of yesterday, only had one first-round pick they could trade. And knowing their pursuit of Jimmy Butler seemed like it wasn't going to be enough to get anything done, especially since there's going to have to be multiple teams involved. How are you going to satisfy everyone? So they went ahead and did this trade with the Jazz, and they went ahead and traded their 31 for a 25, 27, and 29. So here are the details. So Shams broke it earlier today, and so they're getting basically what's probably going to amount to pretty low first round picks in all these drafts. Now, getting these first round picks did a couple of interesting things, meaning that the Suns actually opened up trading their own first round picks. They could technically trade the lesser of their 26 and 28s, but they already sent those out as swaps to the Wizards. And I think even the Nets, like a bunch of teams have multiple swaps. The Suns sent like the swap like multiple times. So they could technically trade those picks again, just in the sense that maybe there might be some teams interested in those instead of those odd numbered picks, just because so many teams have traded their odd numbered picks that it makes even numbered picks in like 2026 and 28 pretty untradeable now. A lot of teams can't even trade those. So maybe there could be like a little more interest in those picks, but most likely they got these specific picks from the Jazz so they could reroute them again. Because they can trade up to 3 of those. All 3 of them they just got in, they could immediately flip them again. If they were to trade their 26 and 28, that's all they can trade, just 2. So they're not, I guess it's not like an optimal amount they can send out. They could probably get more done if they send out those odd number picks. Because they sent out their 2031, they can't trade their 2030. So that's the detail of that. As far as, I'll just go over Utah really quick because the rest of this is mostly going to be pretty Sun-centric and Jimmy Butler-centric, but I really like it for the Jazz. Seems like a good amount to sacrifice considering that it's a 3-for-1, but the Jazz, they are in this position where they have a lot of picks. They have, I think now it's going to be 11. So they give up a little bit, but I think it was important to take quality over quantity because they were going to have 3 first-round picks in all these drafts in 2025, 27, 29. Not real practical that they're going to end up using all those selections. So it makes a little more sense to spread it out a little bit. Ideally, maybe they could have gotten like a 26 or 28, something like that, but they couldn't do that. So they got a 2031, and I think it's pretty valuable to get a pick that far out, even though like we don't know how long. I think getting a pick that far out for any team makes a lot of sense because you have so much time to do something with it. And with a team like the Suns specifically, where they don't really have much ways to improve their outlook after this window with Durant and Booker, getting a pick like that, you never know if things just eventually fall bad. There could be a point where other teams look at the Suns as vulnerable and maybe decide, hey, you know what, that 2031 is super valuable now. And the Jazz may be let's say it happens 3 years from now. The Jazz may be good by then, and maybe that could be a good opportunity to flip that later from even more values for someone that could really help expedite their timeline. So now the Suns have those 3 firsts that they could trade, and now all the talk ever since is that, is there going to be a Jimmy Butler trade? And it just feels like a precursor to that. To me, kind of reminded me of when the Cavs did this trade. They traded Jared Jack and a couple other guys in 2014 just as a salary dump, and it was pretty obvious what was going to happen next. They got the cap space needed to sign LeBron, and 4 days later after that, they ended up signing him. So to me, definitely, and just to everybody, just seems like it is a precursor to that. Doesn't exactly mean that they have, everything's going to line up. It's going to be a huge trade if it happens. And from Ira Heapy talking about how this could be a really large trade, including the Bucks and Raptors. So Mark Stein he said on his Substack a couple of days ago that the Bucks might be interested in getting Bradley Beal again. Which when I first saw that, I was kind of surprised. Like, I understand they tried to trade for him, back before he got traded to the Suns, but to do it again, to be interested again, seeing how things have played out with that contract getting worse, a little surprised by that. So now it sounds like there might actually be interest there. And now we got some more hypotheticals coming in. And I think for the most part, everyone kind of has an idea of what the framework would end up being. Could end up having Middleton to the Heat, and then just some of the bad money that the Bucks and Suns need to send out to a team like the Raptors, or even the Pistons. So I want to get into more so the actual, like, real granular details of what needs to happen for this stuff to go down. And I'll even have some hypothetical trades to show what I could do. But I do need to show just a couple of things that need to happen for all this to go down. So right now, the Suns, they are well over the second apron. We all know that. And if they're going to get Jimmy Butler, they need to trade one of their top three highest paid players. That drum's been pounded for the past month, ever since Jimmy Butler to Phoenix rumors have started. And it's either Durant, Beal, or Booker, and Suns don't want to trade Booker or Durant, so it's probably going to have to be Beal. And now that they have these three firsts, they could probably satisfy all the teams. If it's going to be a 4 or 5 team trade, I think they can probably get. It seems like they're getting a lot closer to this. So that's a simple thing. They need to do that. As for the Heat, with them, they're currently over the first apron and below the second. But that's not really the important thing. I think if the main thing with the Heat, if they're going to trade Jimmy Butler, in all likelihood, they'll probably get a little worse. And period, if they're just going to trade him, they're probably going to want to duck the tax. So right now they're about $13 million over the luxury tax, and that's about a $24 million payment. Now, they don't necessarily need to get below the tax in one fell swoop from a Jimmy Butler trade, but it is possible. I'll go over some scenarios, but they'll definitely save some money. That's going to be a pretty big objective, and also get some players that can help them, get some draft picks. We'll see just how many draft picks they would end up getting. I kind of get the idea that the Suns would probably have to spread these out a little more. So we'll see how that happens. And then the Bucks. So with them, it's pretty. So ever since the Bucks were rumored to potentially get Jimmy Butler, then everyone kind of started figuring out, okay, it is possible because they are over the second apron. So technically they wouldn't have been able to trade for a player like Jimmy Butler or Bradley Beal, since they don't have a player making as much money as them. And obviously they're not going to send out Giannis or Dame. But as long as they aggregate enough players to get above Bradley Beal's $50 million and be able to get under the second apron at the end of the trade, then they're fine. So they just need to combine a bunch of players, but send out more money. So they're, roughly, I don't know, $7 or $8 million. They save $7 to $8 million and get like maybe $2 million below the second apron. So the common framework everyone's pretty much put together to be Middleton, Bobby Portis, Pat Connaughton. All three of those players, when they're combined, it exceeds Bradley Beal. However, they're going to need to send out one more player because they're going to be trading. They'll be doing 3 for 1 in that. And they still need enough space below the second apron to fill out the roster, get back to 14 players. So if they send out Marjon Beauchamp as well, that would help. So I'll get into those scenarios pretty shortly. So let's just get into them now. So the first one I got, pretty Dan, this is kind of similar to a lot of the ones that have already been put out. Pretty simple stuff. I've got, and so it says failed. Just keep in mind. So I only want to show the Fanspo one because it just visually, I like how it shows the players, shows everything a little kind of neatly. But this trade actually does work. So for the Bucks, they're able to send out all those players, take in Bradley Beal, and at the conclusion of it, I'll just show you how it all works at the end, where they're able to stay below the second apron. So basically, they'd be at 12 players. If they do the trade, let's say tomorrow, they'd be able to stay at 12 players for 2 weeks. So then right before the trade deadline, they'd have to sign someone, get to 13, and then they can use that 14th roster spot on a 10-day. Just to give themselves a little more flexibility. It's a lot smaller. These are the cap hits, prorated minimum salaries for each of those signings. And as you can see, they would be $1 million below the second apron, which they would be hard capping themselves to because they're aggregating players in this trade. So that is pretty much going to be the same type of thing the Bucks do in all these trades because it's the only thing they could really do, that 4-for-1. For the Suns, they just get Jimmy Butler straight up, and then I got the Heat, Raptors, and Pistons involved, and I would just imagine that all three of those teams are going to get a pick each, one of those first-round picks that the Suns got. And I'm thinking more about it. It makes sense that the Heat would want 2 first-round picks of value along with Chris Middleton. So I could see them demanding a guy like Ryan Dunn, who would be relegated to the bench anyways for the Suns if they get Jimmy Butler. So I don't know if this is enough for the Heat, but I think it gets them a little closer. And this trade alone gets the Heat under the tax just by swapping Jimmy for Middleton and Dunn. That completely gets them out of the tax, saves them a lot of money, gets them a pretty big trade exception. Raptors, they've got their mid-level exception still, so they can just take Pat Connaughton straight up for without really sending anything back. I have them sending out Garrett Temple because I think of like a roster spot issue. So as you could see, before they do anything right now, they're about $10 million below the luxury tax. And if they were to do, so they could just actually bring in Connaughton without sending out anyone else right now. I don't remember exactly why I had him sending out Temple. But then, yeah, the Pistons, I've got them taking in Bobby Portis, Marjon Beauchamp, Garrett Temple with their cap space. So they can take in Portis and Beauchamp, fit them in their cap space, and then take Garrett Temple in as a minimum guy. So that's kind of like a more basic version of how I think it could go down. The more teams involved, the more money the Heat can save, and the more easier it is for everybody. And then the other framework I have, a little more complicated, and this one's probably a lot less likely. So I expanded a little more. The first thing I did is added Portis to the Heat. I've seen a lot of people throw Bobby Portis to the Heat, and that does make a lot of sense. They'll probably need they probably like another big man, especially now that they're starting Ware. But this does put them over the tax still, which is not a big deal. But at the same time, both Middleton and Portis, they have player options for next season. And I think the Heat ideally just want to have money that doesn't extend beyond 2026, try to keep their books open for that. So if they're okay with paying some tax, this framework works. They'd be able to stay below the tax next year anyways if they do this. But like I said, they could do another trade later to get below the tax. Bucks get Beal, same thing, same framework on their end. Suns a little more complicated. And the big difference is that I've got Nurkic involved because I think another thing a lot of people have been talking about is Nurkic also going to get traded now? And it might be hard for the Suns to pull everything off, like getting Jimmy Butler and satisfying all these teams, but also trying to get Nurkic out. Maybe that's something that gets revisited around next offseason. Once he's actually an expiring contract, might be a little easier to move him. But I've got them trading out Nurkic as well. And they save a good amount of money in this by bringing in Olynyk. I think now that they've got Nick Richards, they could use a stretch big. So I think that'd be pretty that could be a pretty nice addition, saves them a good amount of money. And then they just bring in a couple minimum salaried players that other teams need to send out to make this work. Pistons, same thing. They just, they're using their cap space to bring all these guys in. And like I said, I think all these teams taking in all this bad money, plus the Heat probably get a first round pick each. And then there's another element to this that could make it a little more interesting. So I don't know if you guys remember last year when the Pacers traded for Siakam, they had cap space to do something, but they didn't have enough cap space to get Siakam without like also sending out Buddy Hield along with Bruce Brown. So what they did was they made that trade with the Pelicans where they took in Kira Lewis with the remainder of their cap space, and then they were able to aggregate him immediately, because if you acquire a player with cap space, you can immediately combine him with other salaries. And they combined him with Bruce Brown, and I don't remember who else they sent out, and they were able to match salaries to bring in Siakam. So the Pistons, something I thought about, and I'm not going to show it on the trade machine because it's just going to be way more complicated, but something they could do with their $14 million in cap space is acquire a player that the Heat might be interested in. So could be a player that another team wants to get off of just to save money. So maybe the Pistons extract some seconds to take in that player and then aggregate him and expand this deal even more. Maybe send that player to the Heat, and then the Heat send out Terry Rozier or Duncan Robinson to the Pistons, and the Heat just save way more money there, allows them to take in Bobby Portis or another big man. Maybe the Raptors send out Chris Boucher, something like that. But the Heat are able to get a big man while sending out one of their higher paid guards, which they probably don't want to be spending that much money on. I think they'd, at this point, after doing all these trades, they'd want to get in a big man and get off one of their guards. So just another element of how this can get even more fascinating is if a team like the Pistons with cap space tries to do, like, I guess you call it stepping up, they do like an extra trade and then are able to aggregate these players shortly after. So then just kind of want to talk about how the Suns would look like. I'll just put in this one. So right now, the Suns, before doing anything, they have a $381 million roster. That is after doing the Nick Richards trade. If they were to do the Jimmy Butler trade as, let's say they just do that swap, just doing Beal for Butler, saving a little bit of money like that. What is it, like $2 million? Or how much is Beal making? No, so you're sort of saving like $1 million. Just saving that $1 million will save them like $7 million in their tax and payroll combination. And so that's if they're able to just swap Beal for Jimmy without doing any other parts of this trade, no sending out anyone else, no sending out Nurkic. And then just want to show you how much more money they would save if they did that Nurkic aspect. So here's their payroll with their that last trade I just did applied, where they also sent out Dunn and brought in Josh Richardson. They save, what is that, about $25 million, I believe? $25 million from what they currently have now if they're able to do that. So just showing how punitive the tax system is, where the higher you are, you can get off just like a couple million, and that saves you so much against the tax. And then I kind of want to just go over what the Suns are probably their future payroll situation, because right now, after getting that first round pick, which is probably going to be the Cavs, 30th overall, they're looking at a $510 million roster for next season, with a $277 million tax payment. Their tax payment is projected to be higher than their payroll. But let's say they do that specific type of framework I laid out, where they get Jimmy Butler and they sign him to a max contract for next season, which will start about 54. And they send out that first round pick and they fill out the rest of the roster. That would save them about $60 million. Yeah. So, or is that 70 million? I don't know. But either way, just another way they're able to retool their rotation a little bit and just save like a good amount of money. Let's try to make the payroll like if you can make at least the tax and payroll 1-to-1, I think that's a little more justifiable. And then, the other thing, just the Heat. So here's their payroll now. I think we already went over it. And yeah, here is if they just did that simpler framework I laid out where they bring in Middleton, they bring in Ryan Dunn, they don't really get a big man, but they would just be able to get below the luxury tax. As you can see, they're about 1.4 million below after doing all this. And if they were able to, let's say, do that other framework where they're able to still get a big man like Bobby Portis, he's got a little trade bonus I applied there. Maybe they can expand it a little bit where they're able to bring in another guard to replace. Here I got them sending out Duncan Robinson to the Pistons. They get a little bit of a deeper roster, still deduct the tax. Not perfect framework, but just something where I think the Heat, if they're going to be sending out Jimmy's $49 million without really taking back too much significant money, they try to make the roster as deep as they can for this season. So that is my analysis of the, I guess not so much analysis. The Suns Jazz trade was pretty quick, but just as far as how I could see this shaking out. A week ago, I was saying, that I could not imagine a way that the Suns would be able to make something happen at this point to trade Bradley Beal for Jimmy Butler. But yeah, I did not see this swap coming with the Jazz. Because the Jazz gave up like a good amount. Like we saw the Nets and the Rockets when they made their trade, the Nets had to give up one extra first round pick to get their own picks back. When they traded the Suns picks to Houston, they got their own picks back. They lost one first round pick out of in total. They were net -1 first round pick. I think that's what I'm trying to say. The Jazz go net -2 by doing this. So for the Suns to get not just like an extra first round pick, but 2 extra first round picks, that does change the equation quite a bit. So real good creativity by the Suns, especially if they are able to get Jimmy Butler at the end of all this. Overall, I would say that for the Suns, I'm not sure this really changes things for them significantly. I would guess this probably gets them into the playoffs. As far as trying to knock out one of the top 4 teams, I guess I need to see it. For the Heat, I mean, I think it's just like a solid return. If they're able to get something like what's probably being laid out right now, not just from me, but just from everyone making fake trades for them. For the Bucks, I am, like I mentioned, I'm kind of surprised that there might still be interested in Bradley Beal. And I understand if they feel that with Middleton just injured, he's been pretty injured all the time. I kind of get if they want to get someone Bradley Beal is also pretty injured, probably not as much, but I kind of get that reasoning. But then they're bringing in they're going to have $350 million players for next year. I didn't even go over what the Bucks payroll would look like. I'm not gonna be able to do that right now while I'm streaming, but would put them in a pretty identical situation as the Suns payroll for next season, I would guess, where they're going to be looking at like a 400 million plus payroll plus tax combination. And I really don't think this trade does really like anything for them. So we'll see. I'm a little. The one thing about this whole entire thing is just, I guess I'm still a little skeptical about the Bucks' potential interest in Beal, because that would really help. That's basically what would really let this whole thing shake out. So that'll do it. Yep. We'll trade deadline roughly 2 weeks away now. And I'm going to try to do some more streams as we